just explain how you think about reading this out, because you've intended this as a short story, so you wrote it to be in a book.
Well, yes, I mean it's a story. It wasn't written as a monologue, so there were certain things that I added in there as I read through it, just to try and make sure it was very clear to the listener where, say, Shane in the story will happen to be, or who happened to be speaking,
right?
Which you wouldn't always have to do written on the page,
right?
I think simply because it takes that much more concentration, I think, to listen than it does to read. Because when you're listening to the radio, you're not just sitting there, are you? You'll be doing other things.
Sure.
People right now are going to work, or they're making breakfast, or they're doing whatever they want to do in the mornings.
Yes.
I don't want to know. But so there was that, I think. And I think probably there'll be lots of fiction that just isn't suitable to be listened to, I would imagine. And it's interesting to know if publishers take that into account now, because, of course, audiobooks are very popular now.
Well, yes.
So that'd be interesting to see if they take that into account. I don't know.
So what do you think the publishers should be considering?
Well, I suppose what they are considering is, can we sell this effectively as an audiobook?
Or do they see the audiobook as a way of selling the printed book? Are they bothered?
I think these days it's they stand alone now. There are people who will buy an audiobook and not buy the printed book. But of course, I'm assuming that people are like me and they find it easier to read than to listen. I've met people who they'll listen to a book if they find it a little too difficult to read. For example, I knew a chap, he liked listening to Thomas Hardy books. He liked them. He couldn't follow them when he read them, but he liked listening to them.
So, if you see, I've got more used to non-fiction books, or which I regard as reference books.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm much more likely to skip.
Yeah.
And I tend to do that with a fiction book, whereas a storyteller wants to control the narrative and the flow.
Yes. Yeah. They're telling the story, so they want to tell the whole.
So if you just sort of fast forward for 5 minutes,
yeah,
you're not going to keep track of what's going on in the same way that you might, because a book's so organised. If you can look at the contents page and you can find the stuff with the index and so forth,
mm-hmm,
you might be able to get through a book much quicker than the author intended.
I suppose so. I mean, if you're talking about non-fiction here.
Well, yes, mostly
non-fiction.
Well, sort of spin over
a lot of non-fiction is read that way, isn't it? I mean, a lot of authors of non-fiction of what sorts might not expect the reader to read the whole book. For example, I mean, if you're at university and I did a history degree,
right,
and at no point was I expected to read, say, a particular history book all the way through, because I'd only need chapter 18, because that was specific to what I was studying.
Right.
So I imagine in many cases I suspect that's quite common with non-fiction, that people, particularly if they're studying or if they have a particular interest, they'll read the chapters or the parts that are relevant to what they want to know.
Right.
So I would imagine, hence why there is an index, I suppose, so the book may be read in the way that you've just described.
Right. But with an audio book, you've just got to play it all the way through.
You know what? I've never listened to one, so I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe so. I don't know. Maybe if you listen to it digitally on a Kindle or something, can you jump? Can you search for a particular word?
I'm sure you can. Yes, if you
so you could leap through.
Download it as an MP3. It's got to be. Well, I'm imagining that's how most books exist. You certainly can fast forward on them and so forth.
It'd be interesting to do that, and you'd read the book in a different order every time. You'd have a different book every time. It wouldn't make sense.
It would.
There was a brilliant writer called B.S. Johnson. He died in the 70s, and he wrote some brilliant books. And he wrote a book I haven't read yet called Book in a Box.
Book in a Box.
And it is a little box, and inside are sections of the book. And he wrote it so you can put these sections in any order, and it will still make sense. And you will have a different story every time.
Right.
So but he was very interested in that sort of postmodern thing. That would be quite interesting. And there's a puzzle, isn't there, called Cain's Jawbone, which is the opposite. It's a puzzle. It came out in 1934. It's a murder mystery written on, I think, about 100 different cards. And the challenge is to put all the cards in the right order.
Uh-huh.
And apparently only 3 people have ever solved it. It doesn't sound that difficult to me, but only 3 people have ever solved it. So that's the opposite. That one must be in the right order.
No, but what would be interesting, what the people who get it in wrong order get out of it? Presumably they stay with it and get some sort of story in their minds.
I guess so, but I've never read it. So I can't say. But I suppose you could... I mean, there is the cut-up technique, famously used by William Burroughs, the writer William Burroughs, in which you do that. You cut up your text and mess around with it, and you get something new. In ways, books are very strange to read.
So I would have thought that is more likely with sound. If I'm just thinking about a radio show or social media.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing news programs, then do exist on Twitter in 3-minute chunks or 2-minute chunks.
Okay.
Albums, I still think about albums. A compact disc is or a collection, because bands are still releasing collections of tracks.
Yeah.
They're probably mostly streamed.
Yeah.
But they come out 10 or 12 in a group, don't they?
Yeah, they still roughly keep the idea of the album.
So that is still there.
Yeah.
But on radio, probably they'll pick out a single, or they won't have the longer version of it. They'll have edits and so forth.
Yeah.
But can you have a radio program that had on your model? Let's say there's 5 or 6 novels have come out this week in sections.
Right.
So there's in the book review in studio, we've got 6 boxes with 8 sections in each box, and we pick out 7 at random and read those.
Yeah, you could do that.
You could do that.
Oh, you could do that. Chop them all together and make a new book out of it.
Well, you'd make a radio show out of it.
Yeah, you could do that. There's a jillion different book podcasts out there where people, but often they're not reading sections of the book out.
So what are they typically doing in a book podcast?
It depends. I mean, the good ones they do. They'll read parts of the book out, and they'll discuss it. The bad ones, it's just adolescents going, "Well, I talked to my therapist the other day. Oh my God, isn't it so?" And I don't tend to listen to those for very long.
No, certainly not.
But there's a lot of them out there. But it's an interesting idea. Chopping up, say, 4 or 5 different texts and putting them all together and seeing what you get.
Right.
That'd be very interesting to do. Just as, like you say, it's easy to do with sound. There's lots of music out there where people have taken something and lopped it up and rearranged it and so on and seen what they get.
Yes.
There is a lot of experimental fiction out there. But it's not mainstream, and I suppose books are harder to sell because it's easy to sell music. It's easy to sell music, isn't it? It's easy to sell
music. I mean, there's a lot of
it's so accessible. I mean, in the sense that it's so accessible and it's apt for the form, isn't it? Of radio, of TV, of the web. Just play a bit of music, talk about it. I would say. Yes.
So the authors, the musicians, the writers. I'm not sure how much they accept it, but certainly the record companies have accepted it. Of ways of merchandising things or marketing things, however they want to talk about it, where copyright is actually very lax. Remix is welcomed, sampling is welcomed. They don't really care about the length at which a track is played.
No.
All of that seems to have gone. There's not a lot of control on.
Yeah, it's a big change. I remember in the 80s, there were court cases where artists had been sampled and were suing for copyrights. There were quite a few, weren't there? I mean, pretty much everybody was doing it, wasn't it? Paul McCartney did it. Didn't somebody sample a bit of Staying Alive or something? But they got away with it because they changed it ever so slightly.
Well,
There's
yes.
all that kind of thing, wasn't
Yes,
there?
yes.
But yeah, I think it's changed partly because everybody can do it. Everybody can take a piece of your music and sample it and tweak it and remix it. I mean, you can't sue the planet, can you?
No.
But also,
No.
it's sales, isn't it? It's sales.
It's the way in which
Yeah.
music is sold.
Like you say, it's a great way of, somebody else is advertising your music for free. Somebody else likes you so much, they've remixed your music and bunged it out.
So I started thinking about live performance plays, the way that's promoted, because this is called a drama show. You may remember the Storyteller. Did you ever meet the Storyteller?
No.
No. Well, he's part of Widsworth and Deal Theatre, so there's two of them, and they are. I think what's the term they use? Theatre storytelling. So they can just tell stories in a circle in a pub, like they can tell a story like that. But if they've got a stage, they will have a set. They have masks and they have props.
Yeah.
But it's basically a storytelling tradition that they're working from, and their point of view is that all the stories have been told before. There's no, and that comes from before copyright.
Yeah.
Possibly before printing in many cases.
So they're coming from that long oral tradition.
Yes. So if somebody in the audience wants to take the story they told last week and offer it as their own, or do another version of it, they're not bothered about that at all. And they will tell a story within 3 minutes, or it might take 15 minutes.
Okay.
Or they might do some of it and then do another bit later on.
Okay, sounds very good.
They modify it as they go along.
Yeah, you've had him on the show, have you?
Well, it's his show. This show. This show is. I think I sat in for a couple of summers when he went on holiday. I did a couple of weeks, and then he's gone to the south of France.
You mean you're a cuckoo in the nest?
Yes.
This isn't your show.
No, it's not my show at all. No. No.
You're on every week.
That's true. That is true.
But
he will be back in the summertime.
I see. Or will he?
I think so.
Are you sure?
So.
Is he
I'm hoping so. And he's also on YouTube. There's a lot on YouTube.
Okay.
When the interweb is working.
What's his name?
Matthew.
Oh, okay. Right.
Matthew Hammond.
Well, Matthew Hammond, storyteller, thank you for having me on your show.
Quite right. He's very understanding.
Clearly.
But a bit. He's a bit challenged at the moment. I think it might be quite cold in the south of France. He's near the Pyrenees.
Oh, right.
And I think his main concern at the moment should be staying warm.
Hang on. Have I met him?
You probably have.
I remember going to a storytelling group. It was a few years ago. It was before lockdown. I don't know where the hell it was. It was somewhere like Eid or somewhere. And
yes, that's right.
there were a couple there, and they were talking about going
yes.
to France.
Yes,
and there was a chap running it,
yes.
and I felt really bad because I didn't know then.
Was it a house called Cartwheels?
I can't remember. It was in a pub.
Oh, right, yes.
And it was a nice pub. And I felt ever so bad because I kept falling asleep.
Oh, dear.
What I didn't know at the time was I had sleep apnea. And when sleep apnea is untreated, you will tend to, if you sit down, you'll just start to doze off.
Yes.
I felt so, I had to leave partway through.
I don't think that's a bad, well, I have had that experience myself. I quite like, I like the performance. I feel very relaxed about things.
Yeah.
My worries are disappearing because they've been resolved by some mystical fiction process.
Yeah. And
I start falling asleep, but it's not. I don't intend it as being rude about the performance at all.
So you. I just want to make it clear. I was falling asleep for medical reasons. I felt so embarrassed.
Right,
I mean, they must have been so insulted. But Will, you're saying you. When you hear a story or you see a performance,
if it's a very satisfactory
you'll say
story,
when you fall asleep, that's a
might
compliment.
I might do.
Is that what you're
I
saying?
think it might be. I'm saying it might be.
Well, you didn't fall asleep when I was reading my story.
Was it the Carrick Barton pub?
I honestly can't remember. I've not a clue.
Well, there is. I believe there is a storytelling group at the
big old place, wooden panelling.
Yeah, that sounds.
It was big enough for them to have a room to themselves.
Yes.
And a couple of people told brilliant stories. It was really
Yes.
good. But they must have thought, they must have thought ill of me. Yeah. But you didn't fall asleep during my story, Will.
No, I didn't.
So clearly.
No,
I'm fine. I won't take it personally. No, it's fine. It's fine.
No,
When's Matthew coming back? I like him.
I'm hyperactive at the moment, so it should be all right. I may fall asleep during the Wild show, round about.
Oh, that's
10.
normal.
That doesn't matter, does it?
That's normal.
No. What was I going to say? Yes, theatre.
Yeah.
You see, there is a point of view that the theatre audience has a duty to pay attention and to surrender their evenings. So there's no reason for a theatre production to slice the script up into 3-minute chunks or to offer samples all over social media.
You're right. There's an understanding. I mean, any audience, I think. We live in this odd age where the idea is that we should have no responsibility to anybody else at all, and it's I should be able to sit here and owe you nothing whatsoever. There is that kind of unspoken contract between an audience and the show they're watching. So you're the audience member. You've paid. So firstly, why wouldn't you pay attention? And also courtesy to the people who've worked very hard who are performing on the stage for your entertainment.
What I'm getting at is how you find new audiences.
That. I mean, the thing about 3-minute chunks is, a 3-minute piece of theatre isn't a play, is it? It's a sketch.
Okay, it's a sketch.
I suppose, isn't it? Like on a sketch show.
Well, all right. We'll put it another way. How you see?
I don't think you'd serve an audience well by just lopping everything into 3-minute chunks. To be honest with you.
Well, that's enough. Well,
but so you'd be finding new audience.
No, but maybe the story can be, or something about the story can be told within 3 minutes, or there's different ways of presenting.
Oh, so you mean
the essence of it?
There might well be, actually, and in terms of getting a new audience, I think part of the difficulty is getting people away from a screen and going and seeing something that's flesh,
right?
That's real. Going into a big room,
but you have to be
and
on
sitting there.
Do you have to be on the screen as well in order to be?
That's interesting. I mean,
see, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to play another track, and then I'm going to find my bits of, because I've already told the radio audience. You're quite right. This is a breakfast show, so the chance that people are listening, the many people who were listening half an hour ago, may not be listening now.
What?
It's possible we've got a completely different.
I want to find them. I want to know who they are.
You want to know? Okay. You want them to explain themselves?
Yes.
Fair enough. Well,
what are you saying?
Yeah, 01392 690 450. If you're not going to be listening for the next hour, Jim would like to know why. Okay, here's some more music while I find this piece of paper.